All right, you're all set.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. Welcome to the Evergreen Health Forum, sponsored by Evergreen Health. My name's Chelsea Abraham, and I'm the Youth Programs Coordinator here at NAMI Eastside. And please allow me to introduce our speaker today, who brings with them a wealth of experience in the field of youth mental health, peer support, and advocacy. With a background in counseling and a deep passion for helping young people overcome mental health challenges, Cole Devlin has been actively involved in various organizations and initiatives that promote mental wellness and resilience in youth. As a certified peer counselor, Cole has dedicated his career to empowering young people with the tools and resources they need to prevail over their mental health struggles and lead fulfilling lives. Through his work as an advocate, Cole has tirelessly campaigned for increased awareness and resources for youth mental health and has inspired countless others to join the fight for a mentally healthy world. Cole has a Master of Social Work from the University of Washington and has continued his work in behavioral health as a child and family therapist at the Y Social Impact Center in Seattle. We're honored to have him here tonight to share his expertise and insight with us. You have the floor, Cole.
Well, Chelsea, that was so nice. Like, I can't express how much I appreciate that. And everybody, if you're giving me credit for getting my MSW, please also give Chelsea credit for getting their MSW, because we were in the same program together. And I just really appreciate that you think of me as someone who can come to the space and share my experience and help continue the conversation about youth behavioral health. So thank you. Thank you. And hello, everybody. My name is Cole Devlin. As Chelsea said, I use he, they pronouns. And you're going to hear all about my work and the spaces that I'm involved in as I kind of share my story through kind of a conversational format here in a little bit. But I would love to open up with just some general introductions if people feel up to it. And this is definitely a thing where if you don't feel comfortable sharing, you don't really want to talk, please don't feel pressured to. But I would love just to create space for everyone to kind of share their name, their pronouns. And then in terms of a good icebreaker, I like a silly one because I feel like too many things are serious. So if you want to share, what type of furniture or piece of furniture would you be? It's almost like a personality test, but let's use furniture. So I guess I'll start off. Hello, my name is Cole Devlin. I use he, they pronouns, as I said before. I am coming to you right now as somebody who is a therapist in the field, but really does a lot of youth peer counseling work. So just very appreciative of this opportunity. And if I was a piece of furniture, I think I would be a bunk bed, because I'd like to have like the bunk bed up top. But as a kid, I had one of these ones where like below you have the desk. So it's like you get your business done down below, but then you also have your space up top to rest and relax. And I just felt like it was the perfect piece of furniture. So I'd be one of those funky bunk beds. If anybody else would like to share, please feel free. I'd love to do like a popcorn format.
Okay, thanks.
I guess I can go. Hi, I'm Jordan. I work in healthcare. Probably preferred pronouns are he, him. And if I had to be a piece of furniture or a type of furniture, it would be a futon.
That's a good one. Mark, it sounded like you were going to hop in here too.
Yeah, thanks. Mark Uman, my pronouns are he, him. And I guess if I was a piece of furniture, I would go with a Papa San. We'll go with that. And I'll choose Heliel, as I see her.
Oh, and thank you, Alec. If you guys want to put it in the chat, also feel free. I know speaking verbally in spaces like this, meetings like this, isn't everybody's forte or favorite thing to do.
Hi, I'm Heliel. My pronouns are she, her. And I don't know what I thought, like a table, but a circular table. It is maybe because they're steady and you can sit on it and you can eat on it and you can go over it and dance. And I don't know, you just say furniture? And I was like, okay, I want to be a circular table. I don't know why.
I love it. Thanks for sharing. I also appreciate your thought process on that.
I think I will like David to, if he wants to share, I don't know.
Hi, I'm David. I use he, him pronouns. Um, I think I just like to be a comfortable chair, something comfortable and easy to sit in.
Fair enough. That's a great answer.
Um, Anne, would you like to say anything?
I think if I was piece of furniture, probably a hammock.
Mm,
Yeah, they're very versatile and comfortable. So that sounds pretty good. Okay.
that's a great one.
Uh,
Take
I do not have a list of everybody who's been up there, so I don't know who to call.
And I appreciate people calling on the next person, but if people just want to hop in here too, feel
Yeah.
free. No pressure.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Kate. She, her pronouns. And if I was a piece of furniture, I would be a lamp because I'm a counselor and I like to shine the light on things and shine light on people to help lift people up.
Love it. Great reasoning. Anybody else want to hop in here? As I said, no pressure whatsoever. I hate when we do like forced roll call for meetings and make folks pop on. So that's not the vibe I'm going for.
I guess I'll go next. My name's Chelsea. My pronouns are she, her. And if I were a piece of furniture, I think I would be a love seat because I'm all about spreading love.
But and we'll say maybe final 30 seconds or so of if you want to hop in here, please feel free. But once again, no pressure. Okay, I feel like that's pretty definitive. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate those that shared, and I appreciate those that are just here too. Just to kind of start again from the top. Hello, my name is Cole Devlin. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm very fortunate to be in this space because Chelsea asked me to come. And I just really appreciate the idea of a forum like this. I think I'm going to start just to kind of give an overview of my talk by telling my story from the beginning, but then kind of referencing how it's led to the work that I do currently. And then I'm going to comprehensively cover the work that I do currently, but then also kind of create an invitation for those of you that also do this work or are just interested in it to make a connection, because I would love to network here. Like, of course, I'm here to talk and share my story, but I really view myself as being on the same level as everybody else. I just happen to have the microphone today. So I really hope that this can kind of be somewhat of a conversational format. I went back and forth on whether or not to create like a formal PowerPoint presentation for this, but I'm also a therapist in the field, so I don't got a ton of time. But ultimately, it came down to, I realized we look at a lot of different PowerPoint presentations throughout our week, regardless of whatever field you're in. So this is me looking at, if you'd like to turn your camera on and look back at me, I would definitely appreciate it. But I also know that Zoom is not everybody's favorite thing. So just really appreciate everyone being here. Really hope that this can be interactive to a certain degree. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of go through my general talk and lead up to kind of my conclusion of why it makes me hopeful, the work that I do, particularly at a time when a lot of people are struggling to find hope, because I feel like I got a really beautiful view into some wonderful things that are going on with Washington Union. So that's kind of my overview. And at the end, there'll be a true Q&A session. But I also invite you to put your questions in the chat, or if there's just like a, lapse in conversation there for a second and you want to raise your hand and speak up, please feel free, because I'd love to answer questions as they come up, as opposed to pushing them towards the end when maybe they're a little less significant. So that's my plan, y'all. I hope it works for you. So to start, I am a person who, although I'm a mental health professional, I'm a person who lives with mental health first. And although I've always wanted to be somebody that helps people, I took a long time to figure out that I needed to help myself first before I could help other people. I am what you would call somebody who was born with anxiety and depression and didn't really have knowledge of it or the language to express what I was going through when I was younger. So unfortunately, I struggled quite a bit. And I was raised in a family that's wonderful, but also a lot of type A personalities. So we never really got good at talking about the hard stuff. We just talked about the funny stuff or the serious stuff or whatever's kind of just the conversation of the moment. So although I was a happy-go-lucky kid that had a big smile and was pretty social and loved to engage with folks, did pretty well in school, liked to play sports and all that, I was really struggling underneath the surface and I didn't know where to go with it because it didn't really feel like I had anywhere to go with it or anyone was really that open to hearing about it just because of the culture that we lived in and the culture that I still think surrounds mental health, despite the last few years being a lot better in terms of conversation and how we approach it. But as a youth, I really had a poor self image because I was so worried about being perfect and proving my worth to everybody. And that was tough because nobody's perfect. And I've come to learn that and appreciate that now. But I think perfectionism is something that is pushed in our society quite a bit, unfortunately. So, for young people in particular, especially those who kind of like to think of their life as a narrative, as a movie, it's hard for us to deal with our imperfections sometimes if we don't have a place to take that. So for me, I pushed myself to be really perfect in a lot of ways. And that helped me to a certain degree, but it also hurt me because it allowed my anxiety to kind of run rampant and push me into corners and make me feel a certain way. And it was kind of, it had to work out like this or it wasn't good enough. And I just think that's so unfair to me and to anyone else. So for me, it's been a lifelong journey of kind of finding my places and finding my people in order to get through. And I was very fortunate to be someone who grew up in Northwest Seattle, kind of close to the Admiral District and pretty close to Alki Beach. I now currently live in White Center, where if you're familiar with the West Side, is definitely a little bit different than North Admiral. But I grew up down in this area too, because one of my best friends who I met at 10 years old by just riding my skateboard around grew up here as well. So it's been an interesting journey from Northwest Seattle to Southwest Seattle. But I have to acknowledge that in that process, I've realized I have a lot of privilege. So although I'm a youth peer counselor, I'm somebody who leads with lived experience, and I'll continue getting into that in a moment. I also realize that I'm somebody who a lot of doors are held open for, including doors like this, where I'm given a microphone, I'm given an opportunity, and it's usually because I speak well and represent myself well. But I also realize that due to having an intersectional identity, that I can't deny that I'm a mannish person who's white and educated and has some things that give me opportunities that other people just aren't afforded. So I feel incredibly fortunate to have been able to walk this path, but I'm also just as passionate about making sure that other people can walk it too, without having to feel like they're exceptional or being given opportunities that just line up like they do. So for me, I was really lucky to go to good schools and all that. I just didn't really have a place to take what I was going through and actually process it. So as a teenager, I kind of fell in with a certain crowd where I became involved with the South Seattle punk community. And that I know sounds a little scary at first, but it's been a positive connection. It truly has. Because through music, through community, through sharing experiences with folks who also felt marginalized or oppressed in different ways, I found a reason to stay here, to continue trying, to continue fighting. And it was something that really inspired me throughout my teen years when I was really struggling with a lot of different things. So that kept me around as a teen. And when I was fortunate to go to college, I realized that I should probably start to try and work on myself. And my first attempt at therapy was as a 12-year-old. And in the classic scenario, y'all, I'm telling you, of like sitting on the fancy couch, the therapist is like 15 feet across the room, sitting there with the notebook. We're going through a DBT worksheet as a 12-year-old. And I'm like, I don't even, why are we doing this? I thought I was here to talk. And she didn't really have anything to say. She just said to my mom afterwards that he's probably too smart for his own good, which I was like, what a cop out of an answer, even as a 12-year-old. So I didn't really try therapy again until I was a young adult. And that was actually at the UW when I was there the first time. And I was a freshman. And I remember seeking out services and being like, can I just talk to somebody like a counselor, not academic? And I got paired with this wonderful gentleman, very nice guy, who covered the freshman class A through G at UW. So basically talked to probably about 1,000 youth if they actually wanted to utilize the services. And I had 30 minutes to talk to him. So I was like, I don't even know where to start. So I, even though am a mental health professional now, my run up to actually being open to mental health, the idea of receiving services and providing services in a client-centered, recovery-oriented way, was something that I didn't even get into until I was like 19 or 20. And I actually have a part of my story where physical health has driven me to really get my mental health under control, because I also live with a stomach condition called cyclic vomiting syndrome. In my family, we have a genetic history or predisposition of having like Crohn's or IBS. And then I actually developed something that's rather new, hence the reason why it's called a syndrome, called CVS, which is cyclic vomiting syndrome. And I'm not going to get too deep into that one because you can basically figure out what it is from the title. It ain't pretty. But that happened for me around 21 or so, after I was going through college and stress was mounting and I really felt a need to step out on my own and become an independent person. I got CVS and it totally rocked my world. And at that point, I was already pretty low because my mental health was at a point of I couldn't just stuff it under the rug anymore. The rug was about 3 feet off the ground. And I felt as if it kind of was a point for me to have a reckoning with myself and really look in the mirror, which as a kid, I couldn't. I really could not look at myself in the mirror. But both like in terms of like a metaphorical thing, but in a reality thing, like I had to look in the mirror and see myself for who I was and learn to love that person in a way where I would be open to receiving services, both of a physical and a mental nature. So it was my sister who's an ARMP who was like, we're going to get you into like something like Valley City's behavioral health care, community behavioral health organization, where you can utilize your insurance and get some therapy right now as you're off from school and trying to figure out what you want to do next. So I was incredibly fortunate that things lined up like that because I had the right people in my corner. But it led me to becoming a client at Valley Cities as, gosh, like a 22 or 3-year old. And I actually had an intern as my therapist, and his name was Nils. And Nils Ringo, coolest name I've ever seen in behavioral health. Um, and he was a wonderful, wonderful man. But really, all he did was listen to me and give me space. And so I had about a year-long relationship with him as he was there for just about that long for his practicum, where he really got me to open my mind to what mental health and behavioral health could be, not the shamed, stigmatized version that I had come to know it as. And for me, it was weird because I've always wanted to help people and be in this field in some way. But when I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to be a psychologist. I'm going to figure myself out first before I help other people. And then now, as I'll get to in a moment, it was becoming a peer counselor and then now a social worker by trade, where I really feel like I've come to know and love myself. So I was really fortunate to work with like a variety of people at Valley Cities because I was pretty eager. And now, having worked in community behavioral health for quite some time, I recognize the value of an eager or enthusiastic client who actually does want to engage, because gosh, we get plenty of people who don't, but understandably so. These systems are not perfect. And as I'm going to speak to, I don't think they're really set up to truly serve people in a way that honors them. So through having an amazing team at Valley Cities Rainier Beach, I started to learn about what peer counseling was because I did some employment services stuff. And it was about 10 minutes into being told what a peer counselor was that I was like, okay, I'm definitely interested. How do I get involved? And at that point, I had taken steps to get kind of involved in the community in other ways through volunteering, because I knew that was kind of my way to break through. So I worked with foster youth through an organization called Amara and their emergency sanctuary programs, where it was just an amazing place for youth who enter the foster care system are able to actually go to a home-like environment as their case kind of gets sorted or figured out, as opposed to be stuck in the offices or in a motel somewhere or some other horrible situation that just is not right. So it was there where I was actually starting to learn how to work with youth in a way that really centered their voice and their experience and helped them to feel affirmed in their care. And that actually gave me an opportunity to hop into the next youth peer counseling training, or just I think general peer counseling training. I went through the adult track and became a youth peer within a month of actually learning about the concept. Now, peer counseling is a little bit under fire, unfortunately, because people are trying to figure out how to kind of move it forward or create a career ladder of sorts, make it more official, I guess to say. And although I'm really excited about a lot of things that I'm seeing in Olympia right now with Congress prioritizing behavioral health, I'm a part of a couple of initiatives and bills, I am a little scared that we're going to sacrifice accessibility for the sake of a smoother process or something that looks more like social work. So I'll get into that a little bit more later. But after becoming a youth peer counselor, I looked for work for a while and unfortunately it wasn't really there. there is a problem in the state where we have a lot of amazing peers by trade, but we don't have enough jobs that truly give them the means that they need in order to take care of themselves. So I actually ended up taking a position at Valley Cities because they were like, would you like to be our first youth peer counselor in our wraparound program? And I was like, sure, nobody else is offering me a job right now. And it was for $16.80 an hour, I believe. And I know some folks don't like to talk numbers or finances, and I totally am fine with that as well, but just want to do it for the sake of transparency. Was offered $16.80 to be the first wraparound youth peer counselor, and this is by hour, and really help them build the program in a way. And if you're familiar with what WISE/wraparound is, WISE being wraparound with intensive services, it is a rather intensive service that requires a team effort and a lot of hours put in and a lot of moving pieces that are being coordinated. And it's this true cross-system care that's beautiful in the way it really should be, because it combines or brings together, I should say, the 6 child-facing systems, some of those being mental health, substance usage, juvenile justice, or the legal system, special education, DDA, things of that nature. And then, of course, foster care. So those are the main 6. And it was an amazing opportunity for me, but in many ways it was like an internship. I had to live with my parents in order to make those numbers work. But I really wanted to dive into the field that way because I believed that if I was able to lead with my lived experience and now be proud of myself as opposed to ashamed of my story, like this would be an amazing thing that I would hope to bring to other people. And thankfully, so far, it's kind of worked out that way, because what used to make me feel like I was broken actually now lifts me up, because I've been given an opportunity to go through services in an affirming way where I felt centered throughout. And it was very much recovery oriented, which means you're more than your diagnosis. You're somebody that can live a full life despite your challenges. And actually, some of those challenges make you stronger in the long run, as opposed to a more medical model that we used to see in behavioral health, where it's kind of more so, here's your diagnosis, here's the symptoms, here's your suggested medication, I'll see you in a few months. And of course, that has a time and place too. But I'm really somebody who believes in the idea of recovery oriented care. Hence the reason I call this talk Loud and Clear: what happens when you combine lived experience with voice/choice. Because I believe the recovery model and the way that we're approaching behavioral health right now, where we have more peers in the field and more people with lived experience in leadership positions, is going to be what carries us forward. Because as this funding and these resources come, I feel like the more that we're able to have people in charge who actually know what it's like to be on both sides of the desk, the better things are going to be. Because unfortunately, right now we have a disconnect between leadership and people doing direct service and what their experiences are. So I'm going to continue talking about my work a little bit because I get to be somebody who kind of gets to bridge that gap. But yeah, I just want to add that note here as I begin to talk about my journey as a youth peer counselor. So through the wraparound program at Valley Cities, I was able to do some amazing work over 2.5 years and work probably with about 30 different youth. And it was my first time ever doing true direct service. So there was a lot of learning curves, a lot of trials and error, and unfortunately not a lot of supervision or training along the way, because wraparound/WISE is still pretty new in the state. And WISE itself comes from a lawsuit that it started about 10 years ago and has since been thrown out with prejudice. But it kind of dictates what wraparound with intensive services is in Washington. It came out of the fact that the state was not really serving foster youth like they should, particularly transition age foster youth. Therefore, they were falling through the cracks when they're trying to get different services and navigate different systems. So WISE was instituted so that those youth can get 10.5 hours of service each month and have like a team-based, strength-based approach to helping them work on their vision for themselves so that they can sustainably take care of themselves and choose when they want to actually work with service providers. It's a beautiful vision. But of course, when you combine behavioral health and legal stuff, it doesn't necessarily always go together. So I like to say I love wraparound because that comes from even cooler origins of being up in like the Inuit community 30, 40 years ago. I love wraparound, but I tolerate WISE because unfortunately, I think a lot of our services and systems, this is going to be a theme of my talk, might be well-intentioned. Sometimes they're just straight up not. But unfortunately, the impact is a lot different. I think that in a place like Washington State, particularly King County, we shouldn't be like 45th when it comes to behavioral health services. And I know that statistic is now dated by at least 5 years. But when we're coming in with the South and other places in terms of like our behavioral health services, but then we have the culture or atmosphere that we do up here, where people love to talk about how much they care about these values and how much they care about these things, but then unfortunately we don't see a lot of support. I think it's kind of a reckoning of what we need to do here, where we need to get serious, because a place like ours, especially a county like ours, where we have such an abundance of resources in terms of brain power and money, we shouldn't be providing such poor services, and we shouldn't be so behind like we are with having youth actually lead us with their voice and their experience. Because we've talked about engaging youth and creating a Washington State leadership network for quite some time now. I've been a part of those conversations for about 5 years, but we haven't actually moved forward on it. And there's not a lot of youth who are truly involved. I'm considered to be one of the co-youth tri-leads of the King County FISPER, something I'll talk a little bit more about here in a second. But I'm also 30 years old. I just turned 30 a couple weeks ago. And am I still really truly considered a youth? I mean, I hope so to some degree. But we need to have more young people who feel like they can take on those roles and actually succeed in them. So after about 2.5 years at Valley Cities, I was fortunate to work my way into leadership positions like the one I was just talking about with the King County FISPER, which is the Family Youth System Partner Roundtable. And that's actually an extension of WISE in many ways, where it's also a community forum where we do stuff like this. Like I was just watching 2 different presentations about 30 minutes ago, where we come together on a monthly basis and we talk about community matters across the board. And everybody that's there has a say, has a voice. And it can be a family member that drives the conversation, or it can be a system partner that does. And we're pretty system partner heavy right now, so we like to back off, because any family or youth that comes through there, we want to support, we want to uplift. But we're also kind of struggling to get those true community members right now, because there's a lot of different things going on. So I work with the King County FISPER, which we've also kind of renamed the King County Community Collaborative, KC3. You might have heard of us. And if you'd ever like to come through, I would love to open the door for you. So of course, maybe towards the end of this, we can talk about that. I'll put some of my information in the chat so people can reach out to me. But then also, one thing that I'm really excited about is through doing some public speaking like this, including at the WISE Symposium of 2019, where I was part of the closing keynote panel, which was youth and then youth peer counselors that have worked with youth and had great success, getting to share our experiences in kind of a manner like this, but more of a panel. So it was by doing that that I got introduced to the Spark Peer Learning Center. And the Spark Peer Learning Center is students providing and receiving knowledge. And this is the work that I really, truly get excited about, because the impact or the scope of it is huge, where Spark provides education and advocacy on youth peer counseling in Washington State. And they provide their classes about youth peer counseling, which get youth pretty much up to the doorstep of being able to apply to become a youth peer counselor and take the test in all these different spaces, including juvenile rehabilitation facilities like Green Hill, or alternative high schools and social emotional classrooms that are, amazing resources for youth in situations like that. So we're actually doing amazing work where we're kind of working with the different regions of Washington State on a varying basis as to what they need to provide these classes and this advocacy, and hopefully these bridges towards opportunities for young people that are interested in utilizing their lived experience to get involved in the behavioral health system, but then also beyond that. Because I think peer counseling is something kind of like therapy, where we kind of use Heidi language with it, but it really can be a simple concept of having somebody walk alongside you because they somewhat understand what you're going through, but also recognize your individuality. And they just want to help you write your own story, your own recovery journey. So at a time when we really need it, I think youth peer counseling can be something that really helps our young people find stability, create roots, actually feel like they're engaged in their community in a way that's meaningful and their voice is heard. But as I spoke to earlier, Congress is kind of getting involved in a way where they want to do it their way and push it through a certain way and make it look like social work, where it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. There's enough seats at the table for all these different roles and positions. We just have to actually respect them. And so as I've gone from being a youth peer counselor who holds these leadership positions at a county level, then at a state level, my official title with the King County FISPER is co-youth tri-lead, but I'm probably going to become a system partner here. And then with the Spark Peer Learning Center, because those people are like family to me now, after we've known each other for 3 or 4 years, I'm the co-president of the board. And I feel very fortunate to do that because it allows me to remain involved at a pretty high level, but also I'm not exactly a person who's able to travel all across the state. So it feels like a role where I can still make an impact, but also kind of stay in my lane. And those two leadership positions have lifted me up in a way where I just feel so grateful, because I know there's a lot of people who are just as talented as me, just as well spoken, just as deserving, that don't get these opportunities to speak in spaces like this or be involved with Congress in a way where I have representatives reach out to me. And for me, that's something where, coming from being a youth who could barely look in the mirror at himself and really hated myself because I wasn't perfect or I wasn't good enough in my mind, despite a lot of people saying they loved me and that I was worthy, that I was good enough. And having a pretty dang good life, although some definite challenges, especially as a teen, um, to now all of a sudden being somebody who actually likes to hear myself talk, like what the heck's up with that? And being able to do things like this where I actually feel confident in what I'm saying and just telling my story. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And when I see young people get empowered in this way and get engaged with the work, but more importantly, their communities, I get really excited. And so, although after grad school, going to the UW, go Dogs, with Chelsea and getting my master's of social work, and that was an amazing time. But doing that during a pandemic, when I got in on Valentine's Day 2020, like Chelsea, I don't need to tell you, that was rough. Going to school in general is hard, y'all. I think we all know that. But then to do it at a time when we are facing unprecedented trauma and everybody's looking at each other like, what the heck's going on? It was really, really challenging. And the burnout really started to mount for me. And that was something that I've always been kind of a hero type, a person who loves to care give. Like I really care about other people more than I care about myself sometimes. Although, as I'm saying, I've learned to care about myself too. There's a balance that needs to be struck there. But I've kind of been someone who jumped into the work headfirst years ago and then sidelined my own recovery journey and my own self care a little bit there because I felt a need to really step up and provide for others kind of at the expense of myself. But now I've realized through going through quite the grind with Valley Cities and then grad school that I need to prioritize myself first in order to take care of other people. And currently, that's by doing work with the Y Social Impact Center here in Seattle, where I'm once again in the WISE world, but this time as a therapist and as one of the only peers to work my way up to being in a therapist position. So once again, kind of unintentionally trailblazing, but with the hope that more people can feel like they can walk this path too, because there definitely should be more people with my experience, my drive, my whatever, that can do this too, because we need as many people as we can get right now. So I'm still kind of learning how to be a therapist. I'm a baby in that regard because I've been doing it for about 5-6 months. But I am now trying to kind of create a role where I can be a clinician, I can be a provider that's also still a real person. I can utilize my lived experience in ways that are beneficial to the client and centers them first and foremost. But I can still be approachable because I can open up and talk about different things and be vulnerable too. And it sounds good in theory, but not everybody's really a fan of it. So I'm kind of having to do a little bit of propping myself up as I kind of walk this path right now. And that's transparency that I like to provide of I'm human too. I'm going through all this stuff that we've been through the last 3 years, and I just had some health struggles. But I just feel like I can't really stop at this point because I have learned so much about myself along the way. And the feedback that I've gotten from people who feel like they can walk this path and are, because I started just a little bit before them, is something that keeps me going on even the toughest of days. Because I think y'all know, whether you're a community member here or a provider or somebody who's just a system partner of any nature, this is a really, really tough field that we work in. And it's not perfect because we're trying to apply these big, huge systems to just doing things like basic care towards each other, things that mutual aid honestly get done better in faster time. But I refuse to give up on trying to find a way to reach people in mass because community behavioral health was the safety net that saved me. And I see what it does for people on Medicaid and Medicare. And I also have seen the unprecedented trauma and people's reactions to it the last few years when it finally feels like people can open up and say, I'm struggling. This has been really tough. I think I might have anxiety. I'm dealing with symptoms of depression. When even just 10 years before that, we weren't having those conversations. And this kind of ties into my overall theme of hope. The thing that I'm really getting from young people is they are so with it in a way that they're already talking about mental health. They're already talking about trauma. They have language and ways to express themselves that I haven't seen in some adults that hold leadership positions in this field. So my big thing is throughout the years, I've been very fortunate to work with youth on multiple different levels, from a direct service like perspective to kind of doing like community organizing through the FISPERT to even doing advocacy on like a policy level in Olympia, particularly regarding youth peer counseling. And through it all, I've met some amazing, amazing young people who inspire me just as much as they say I inspire them because of their resiliency, because of their hope, because of the personality that they bring to this. Because we need more real people. And I think ultimately, I'm very hopeful right now because if we give this next generation the tools to truly take care of themselves and build better systems, they'll do it. It's just a matter of us giving them the means and getting out of their way to a certain degree. So as I help to kind of drive forward the idea of the Washington State Youth Leadership Network, as that's kind of coming into the fold again here after 5 years of trying it and it's not really going anywhere, I'm really trying to push allowing young people with lived experience, with strong voices, with a desire to be a part of their communities and to lead, to actually be the people who drive and create what this project is going to be. And that's the thing. I think if we all really care about young people, we need to create space for them. And we need to allow them to feel like they have just as much power as anybody else in the room when they're invited to it. One thing I'll provide feedback on, y'all, is saying that you're empowering young people, but then giving them 10 minutes at the meeting to share their story in an abridged version and a $5 Starbucks gift card really isn't empowerment. Half the time it ends up being tokenism. So I just really encourage people, and in some cases challenge people, to think about how they're truly engaging with youth, and if it leads to empowerment, or if it just leads to us kind of finding a means to an end and getting a project done. And at this point, I think a lot of people are really getting behind the notion of giving youth the keys. And I just hope that we stay with that, especially as these amazing projects emerge at a very crucial time. Because I think that ultimately, the more that we're able to come together, the more that we're able to actually truly act as a community, the better the outcomes. And right now, I feel like we're rather fragmented and divisive on so many different levels, even involving behavioral health and the approach to it, including kind of the two schools of thought that I shared about at the beginning regarding the medical model and the recovery model. I still lock horns with some people who might have gotten their degree about 3-4 decades ago and don't really appreciate how I lead with my lived experience or try to empower youth that are still kind of engaging in harmful behaviors because I want to use a harm reduction method and they think that abstinence needs to be the way. And it becomes almost like a little bit of a territorial fight in front of the youth. This is something that happened to me quite a bit as a youth peer. And it just feels like we're truly not working collaboratively when we should be. I don't get why we call ourselves social services, but then we're not really social in the field. So that's something that I hope to help kind of bring to the field at this time. I'm by no means perfect. I've definitely struggled the last few months. But at the same time, I feel incredibly fortunate to be a real person who's been given this platform to encourage and empower other people. And so I've done the work from being a youth who was helping to run like DIY punk shows in the community and making sure everybody was taken care of and got home safe, to now being a youth peer counselor that's worked all the way up to being a therapist at an organization that is doing amazing work and actually came and got me after I spent 3 months after grad school doing nothing in my parents' basement, where I'm actually working with the stated population that WISE was created for of transition age foster youth. I'm a therapist for 16 to 21-year-old foster youth that are aging out of the system. And I just think it's amazing that this position that I've always dreamed of actually existed by the time I got to the field. And I was interested in doing about 2 therapy jobs. I was just fortunate to find the right one at the right time. So now that I have these leadership positions with the FISPERT, where I hope to bring on a new youth leader here soon, because if you didn't hear me earlier, I'm 30 years old and it's time for me not to be officially considered a youth anymore. To what I'm doing with the Spark Peer Learning Center, where we'll be bringing those classes to a location near you soon. And if you know of young people who are interested in youth peer counseling, youth peer support, just learning about it, maybe not necessarily even pursuing it as a career, because unfortunately we don't really have that infrastructure yet. And although we're working on it, it's an imperfect vision and I don't want to push it through just yet. I would love to help build a bridge for that. I would love to help any young person who you think would benefit from any kind of mentorship or any kind of connections to the field because that's how I got here. And I just think about paying it back, but also paying it forward. So as I kind of continue to do these talks and all that and see some of y'all around, please feel like you can approach me because I would love to help make a connection. I'd love to talk about dang near anything. I'm rather chatty, but I'd also love to hear about your work and see how I can help you do it, because that's ultimately what I'm invested in here. It's teamwork, makes the dream work. And I'm so tired of us being territorial and doing individual efforts when the team approach would be so much better. So that's kind of my general talk, y'all. I'd love to open it up to questions. And if people want specifics on some of my roles and current projects I'm working on, please feel free. But yeah, that's just the general talk I can do at this moment. I kind of hope to move into an interactive portion now. So
Thank you so much, Cole, for sharing your story. I just want to say for the record, you're officially still a young person for NAMI for another 5 years. So once you're 36, then you age out.
good to know. And I should say, y'all, through my journeys the last few years, the leadership positions and the FISPERT, one of the people who was very much a solid part of the FISPERT when I joined it as a babe was Jenny Gruenberg, who used to do, I think, NAMI Washington's like overall youth services. And then it was Jenny through the FISPERT that got me involved with Ending the Silence. And I'm actually a trained Ending the Silence presenter. I've just never done a presentation because I've been so busy. But I've always had a soft spot for NAMI. So I just appreciate being in these spaces and continuing to work with y'all. And then, yeah, Jenny became Sage Walloon. And then I think now it's somebody else who's really nice and helps me do the youth engagement subcommittee for the FISPERT. So.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I was wondering if you could possibly share some links about to some of these programs where I might be able to direct youth to get involved if it might be right for them.
Yeah. So with the FISPERT, we only really have a Facebook page. King County's websites are a mess, y'all. So we've taken it to Facebook. So if you want to send anybody to our Facebook page, we actually all kind of take turns checking the inbox there. In terms of the Spark Peer Learning Center, similar thing with Facebook. They also do have a website. I can take a moment here in just a sec to pull those up to make sure everybody gets them. But also, Kate, I'd love to give you my email just in case you want to make like a direct connection with someone too. Definitely want to make myself
Great.
available.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And that's an open offer to anyone, y'all. Like whether you're a community member or you're somebody who does very similar work, I'd love to make a connection and see how we can collaborate. Cool. Put my number right now. In my email. Oh, prepare y'all. It's some caps lock. So it looks like I'm yelling. Whoops. It's all right though. But yeah, I guess y'all, I'd kind of like to maybe just summarize some of the main themes in my talk too. My main takeaway or theme, I should say, is that I'm somebody who has lived experience, but was also given a platform and a microphone, including a microphone like this, where I don't think I'm that special. I don't think I'm that far along in my like mental health recovery journey where I feel like rock solid and I can take anything on. Last month or two has been challenging, but I do think I've been somebody who's been given opportunities and just been encouraged in the right ways to continue persisting, to find a way to share my voice for the benefit of other people. So if you know young people who have impressive lived experience and they like to utilize it in a way that benefits others, they could be me. They could do exactly this. Or you could be somebody who identifies as having lived experience. You just haven't figured out a way to incorporate it into your work yet. I think right now the field is receptive to people actually being real and vulnerable and sharing a bit more. And I really encourage people to do that because the gains that you can see in terms of engagement and actually partnering with the people that you work with where they feel honored in the process and like their vision's actually being achieved, it produces amazing results. So that's my main thing. I'm getting a little bit of flack right now from different places because peers, unfortunately, as much as people love to talk about them, they don't always love to work with them. And now that I'm a peer who's become a therapist and I'm open about having my own mental health recovery journey, I've kind of been told, well, that's great, Cole, but what about your caseload? So it's a thing where I think it's a balance, and it's not always a smooth one. But I encourage people to try to strike this balance if you feel like it's going to benefit you or your community or really anyone. Because, yeah, we need more of this. We need more people out there. So just thank you once again for the opportunity to be here and to share my story.
Thanks again, Cole. I have a quick question for you. Since you're pretty tapped into advocacy pieces, we like to do that here at NAMI. So I was curious if there's any sort of legislation or budget proviso type of issues that have come up before the legislature currently that you need help amplifying and getting some folks to support.
Yeah. So currently there's some, and thank you for this opportunity. I'd love to kind of expand upon some of the legislation that I was referencing earlier. There are a lot of amazing bills and like effort being put forth regarding behavioral health in Olympia right now in Congress. I just feel like a couple of them are unfortunately a little bit disconnected from the communities that they're meant to represent or to uplift. One being House Bill, or no, actually, this would be Senate Bill 5555. And I think that at this point, that one might be stopped, but it has another bill that's in the House that, oh gosh, it's like 15. I'll have to look that one up. But just to speak to those bills in general, they are bills that are trying to reimagine what peer counseling or peer support is here in Washington State, with the intention of building a career ladder, more infrastructure, the opportunity to become a supervisor, really just make it that much more of a viable profession. Because if you heard the beginning of my talk, I did not make much money as a youth peer counselor and basically had to sacrifice my independence in many ways to live with my older parents, which was still a good situation for me, to make being a youth peer counselor work and something that actually was feasible for me. Because I always had the intention of probably going to grad school or becoming a different type of professional on top of being a peer. But yeah, it took some struggling and grinding to get there. And so, although I love the idea of like increasing salaries for peers and providing them with like leadership opportunities that are a little bit more set in stone, the thing about Senate Bill 5555 and then House Bill, oh gosh, 1560, oh, the numbers, the acronyms, y'all, there's too many of them. This field in particular, we got way too much of that going on. But the issue with this particular bill that I'd like to share as a youth peer counseling leader in this state is that for the purpose of creating a more familiar ladder, we would be sacrificing accessibility in the process, where this would make becoming a peer counselor much like becoming a social worker, where you need to be formally educated, have a high school degree. You would need to do about 1,000 hours of apprenticeship before you could even take the test to be a peer. So it's basically asking folks to do 1,000 hours of volunteer work as a peer, which is very intensive work, before they could even officially consider themselves a peer and actually make money from it. And for us, those of us that are working with young people in environments or situations where we're trying to help them kind of lift themselves out of being oppressed or in poverty or whatever, like this creates more barriers than it takes down, because people that we work with in the JR facilities, like they wouldn't be able to accrue any kind of volunteer experience doing youth peer counseling stuff. So right now we're providing jobs to people coming out of that system and allowing them to be youth peer counselors or to join Spark as trainers or to help us do advocacy so that they don't fall through the gaps. And that's what our stated goal should be here in the state, or it supposedly is, of not allowing so many transitional age youth to fall through the gaps of the systems when they're coming out of one in particular. Now we're saying that we're going to take away that pathway at one of the most crucial times for it. And so that's one that I would encourage people to kind of read up on. It's in line with a lot of other workforce development stuff that's going through. This bill actually existed in a different form last year, and it was put forth by Representative Lauren Davis. And unfortunately, it didn't go too well for her, and she's now not too pleased with the peer community at large. So it's been pushed through again by a different representative this time, through, I think, the actual like the education committee as opposed to healthcare. But it's a little bit of a Trojan horse situation. So I say that as an independent peer leader, not associated with any of my organizations. But I would just encourage folks to get involved and read up on some of those bills, because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of great things being said and done for behavioral health here in Washington State. But we just don't have enough community stakeholders involved yet. It's the privileged peers, it's the ones that are the leaders of certain organizations and stuff that are being invited to these tables. Whereas we have to make a Facebook post to the general like Washington peer group just to inform a lot of folks that once again, the profession's under fire. So we need more people involved in that piece. And they supposedly are trying to build more space for us, but also the peer community and other communities within behavioral health are organizing to have lobbyists so that we have a voice within Olympia, because we think it's great that we're finally at the table, but we want to be sitting at the table. We don't want to be on the menu. So that's one I would encourage people to stay in touch with. I think it's moving forward now. That the House bill of it that I still need to read up on a little bit is moving forward because it addressed different things a little bit better. But there's still been upwards of about 75 peers who are opposing it across the state, because we're very fearful that it would take away the accessibility component at a time when it's needed most. So.
Cole, I have a question. This is Joe Stevens. I'm a NAMI facilitator for a spiritual support group. I've been there for about 18, 19 years. I'm also on the Seattle Archdiocese Mental Health Board, and we have put a program together where we're working with the high school students. And what we're doing is we're working in conjunction with LifeWorks. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're a suicide prevention, a national organization that trains people. And we are like a grassroots level. We're training high school students on teenage suicide prevention so they can go back to their high schools and give safe talk classes to their peers. And in being involved in the ground floor on this, I went through the first training. The high school students that we're training are just outstanding. I mean, it's if our future is in their hands, we're in good shape. But I know we're going to run up against some that's going to want to do more. And we're hoping when they go to college, they'll continue this into college. But if they want to do more and they're looking for a mentor or somebody they can talk to that can maybe show them the ropes a little bit, hear what their aspirations are and kind of guide them in a direction, would you be the person to send them to?
I'd be happy to, Joe. And thank you so much for sharing all that and the work that you're doing. And the thing is, I love to work in a team like capacity or with the team approach. So I would love to be a point person who maybe helps them start that journey and then bring them into an organization like Spark, where there's a lot of different youth leaders and people who could possibly help, and see if that's something where it's just like a viable resource for people in that situation. So yeah, I would love to, Joe. And I put my information in the chat.
Yeah, I took it down.
Yeah.
And I do apologize. I was 15 minutes late tonight, so I missed the beginning of your presentation.
Oh,
I'm not
good.
You're there. But anyways, so I've been involved in that side of it. And my real, I guess my crusade is to get rid of the stigma. That's what I really want to do. If we get rid of the stigma, everything else is going to fall into place. If people should be able to go to their doctors, being diagnosed with mental illness and be the same as if it was cancer or diabetes or physical illness. But if they get diagnosed with that mental illness, they're like this, they can't talk to anybody. Where if they're the other ones, they're out there, they're calling the Cancer Society, they're talking to their friends, relatives, pray for me, going to the church communities. It just shouldn't be that way. That's my goal. I want to get to that point, because then we can start talking about mental illness without having the stigma there. And everybody's saying, well, I don't know about that. You know, we need to be on the same level with the Cancer Society, the Heart Society, all these different organizations that are getting oodles of money and all the support. We need to be there too. And that's what I'm trying to do, is get us to that level, because like you're talking about what you're doing, you don't want to be the menu, you want to be at the table. And that's really what it's all about. When you have the clout and you have people behind you, I think that's going to be a huge thing. So we're thinking of putting together a panel to speak at our church, because what I want to do is have mental illness have a face. And I want people to tell their story on the panel so they can see this person sitting in the pew next to you every week. He has mental illness and he's open about it. He's talking about it. And then that way, people that do have it have someone they can go and talk to, and they can ask, questions, and it takes the stigma away, that for some people anyways, and that's kind of how I'm going to attack it on my side. We're going to put a panel together, and I'll let you know if I think it would fit in with the panel we want to put together. We want to have 3 people telling their stories, and then 2 professionals to answer questions, somebody from the Archdiocese to be there from the Archdiocese level. And I think it'll be pretty powerful. I'm going to take a real risk, and I'm going to talk after each Mass one weekend. And one of the last things I'm going to ask them is to be brave. And I'd like to ask by a show of hands, how many people out there have had mental illness or had a friend that they know had mental illness, or a family member, or anyone you know that's had mental illness. Has it touched your life? Please raise your hand. And I'm hoping I get about 80% of the hands going up, because we know the numbers because we're in it. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people aren't. And if they start seeing things like that, that's how it can start changing it, is on the grassroots level, and start making people realize, wow, I didn't know he had mental. Wow. We should be, he's a hell of a guy. We should be helping him. That's what we got to do. We got to do this thing, man. It's like what you're doing. You're talking your story. And that's so valuable. I want to thank you for that, because the more you do that, the more you inspire other people to go out and do the same thing.
Well, thank you, Joe. That's all incredibly kind of you to say. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing. It's those conversations on basically any level that really drive this work forward. I mean, as much as the really important, stuffy, like policy meetings like to think that they're the things that are driving us forward, it's the grassroots level that really makes this work approachable. And yeah, you might have just missed the very beginning of my story, and how I was a youth that on the outside looked like he had everything figured out, and on the inside suffered from a weight of feeling misunderstood and broken in many ways, because the stigma surrounding mental health was so high. Even though I had history in my family, none of my family liked to talk about it. So where was I going to talk about it? So somehow, some way, I developed a voice in the process of like learning to truly love myself. And now I just feel so fortunate to have a platform to share and encourage other people to do the same. So I would love to like serve as a point person or a mentor if it works in terms of fit for any young people you know. And actually, I think I have an email in my inbox from the Archdiocese about what y'all are putting together on like the 29th of March.
Yeah. A youth mental health conference.
Yeah, I was asked to potentially come and be a part of a panel of young people there. And that sounds pretty interesting. I myself am not very religious, but I appreciate what y'all are doing as an organization, and think that it's amazing that you're helping to drive this work forward in such a meaningful way. Thank you.
I do spiritual retreats too online, 2.5-hour ones. I did one on Saturday, and it was very well attended. The topic of it was the amazing power of gratitude. And I was doing research on this. Templeton, which is the funds, they supported a whole research on gratitude, how it affects your health. And they found that it affects your mental health, your blood pressure, all these different things. People that show gratitude every day have a much healthier life. And it's been proven to help with depression and decrease the level of depression and anxieties. It's amazing. And all it is just having gratitude. So I instructed those people to try to put together an attitude diary, a gratitude diary. And then every day put something you're thankful for in there. And then when you're having one of those rough days, go back and read that, because we're all blessed in so many ways. And I think that's a big part of it too. If we can just start not dwelling on our negative mindset, but the positive, the things we can do, not the things we feel we can't do. Talk about the things we can do, which is what you're doing. And it's amazing that you're tapping into that strength and you're taking it as far as you can.
Oh, thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Once again, I feel like a pretty average guy half the time, but I'm just very fortunate to even be in spaces and interact with people like you. So thank you for what you do. And you're totally right. Gratitude is something where I think the framework that we have is so important. For me, when I was young, I used to feel like broken or defective. And now I know that I've just been through some things that have actually made me into a pretty dang resilient and strong person. So like being able to have a language to express what you're truly going through, and then also being able to express like what is going well in your life and what are things that you're truly thankful for, despite all the challenges and adversity that we do face. And I know sometimes it's really hard to see those things, but to actually create an intentional practice of journaling or sharing with folks, or I love an activity, I've shared this with some of my clients, of like writing a letter to someone that you really care about and are grateful for, and then delivering it, like whether like through the mail or in person, and then just having a moment with that person of like, you really mean a lot to me. It's just so profound. so significant.
Well, one of the amazing things I found out during my research is that teenagers, the reason why parents are so frustrated because they don't show gratitude for the life they have. They have a good life and they're not thankful. Well, the reason is their brain's not developed. They can't show gratitude.
Mhm, mhm.
Their brains develop at a different level, I found out, and that comes in the 20s. And that's why when a lot of them go off to college, they come back so thankful and you develop that friendship with them. But they're not able to stop expecting to express gratitude. And the best way to approach them is just to tell them how much you like them, what you like about them. And that will bring on the discussion you're looking to have with your teenagers in your family, if you're a parent or something like that. But to keep telling them, why don't you call me? You don't call me enough. That doesn't work. But if you send them a text saying, you're a pretty special guy, I love how you do this, you'll get a call right away.
Yeah.
Because
love
why
it.
would you want to call somebody if you know all they're going to do is complain?
Yeah, especially when you're under the stress of something like college or what this pandemic has been, all that.
Yeah.
Trying to force certain interactions, really you have to invite people in. So I think you're really onto something there, Joe. And then also I'd like to say, like, for teens, like, of course we all kind of have that cavalier, like, I'm independent, I'm in charge of myself. But that kind of coincides with, like, teens usually first start experiencing mental health like in full around like the 16 zone. And then like they go through kind of becoming independent and adult. And then around 21 or so is the reemergence of a lot of mental health, like I guess to say symptoms or warning signs, where it's like it's kind of an ebb and flow. So I think like your point there about like the developing human and them not necessarily knowing what to say or how to say it at a young age doesn't mean that they're not going to get there. And really, if they go through that like self-awareness process, that self-reflection process, they can get there in a very profound way.
And the
So,
development was really stymied by the COVID coming on the scene, not having their high school experience of going out with their friends and even after class, walking from one classroom to the other and talking with them and sharing stories. That's really hindered our youth, and that's why mental illness is so more prevalent with them now because they've isolated themselves with Zoom meetings, Zoom classes, and they have no one to talk to. And what mental illness does, it tells you those lies. And when you got no one else to talk to, you start believing the lies. And that's the biggest downfall, pitfall is just not having anyone to process with.
absolutely. I think about if I would have been a young person going through what they're going through right now, I might not be here to tell this story today. It's incredible what we've been through these last few years. And I know we're actually probably a little bit over at this point, y'all. So in closing, I would just like to say, please take care of yourself, because I think we're in a time right now where we're talking about mental health, but the conversation is still pretty early on, where I think that a lot of people are just now opening their minds to being receptive to working on themselves in such a way where you're vulnerable about your mental health. But it can be one of those amazing and beautiful and rewarding processes that you ever go through. And if you know young people that are struggling, really just providing an ear or being vulnerable about your own experiences is a way to support them where they can actually feel seen and heard. So I think if you appreciate how I lead by example, by being open about my own recovery journey and what I have to do on the daily just to stay right, I encourage you to be open about yours, because I think we're finally in a space where people want to hear about it. And we need to hear about it more, much like what Joe's doing with his space, where he's encouraging conversations and people to speak up and to smash the stigma, because it's the stigma that's killing people more so than a lot of these diagnoses. So, and yeah, I mean, I think my final statistics for y'all are, on average, it takes people like 7 to 10 years to actually reach out for help with mental health after developing symptoms. And people who live with serious mental illness live on average about 25 years less than folks who don't identify as having mental illness. And I think quite honestly, that's more so the response that we have to it than the things that people truly deal with. So just some more food for thought. But thank you, everybody. I appreciate you hanging around a couple minutes after. I thought I was ending early. I was like, crap, did I talk for 15 minutes or something? But just appreciate everybody hanging around and creating the space with me. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Cole. That was amazing. I'm going to post a link to the survey at the end, if everyone can just fill that out. It should be that when you exit out, supposedly there's a link to it, but just in case, I'll post it in the chat. So everyone has access to that. Just click that. Other than that, thank you so much again to Evergreen Health, and everyone else have a good rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Please reach out if you have anything come to mind.